In the sun-baked hills of West Texas, three desperate men are about to make a fatal mistake. When escaped convicts target a lonely ranch owned by a quiet old cowboy, they think they've found their ticket to Mexico. They couldn't be more wrong. James McCallister isn't just some aging rancher. He's the most legendary U.S. Marshal in American history, with more captures and kills than any lawman since Wyatt Earp. They called him Iron Hand McCallister, a ghost from the past who never lost his prey. This isn't just another robbery gone wrong. This is the story of how three killers learn why McCallister's name still sends chills through federal prisons. Some legends never retire, and the deadliest predators are the ones that look like easy prey. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn crept over the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold as James McCallister walked his fence line. At 72, he still moved with the fluid grace of a much younger man, his weathered hands checking each post with methodical precision. His old ranch dog Buck trotted beside him, grey around the muzzle but alert as ever. The morning routine hadn't changed in 15 years, not since he'd hung up his badge and bought this quiet piece of land 40 miles outside of San Antonio. Every morning, check the fences, tend the horses, maintain the ranch. Simple work for what most folks thought was a simple man. The Winchester rifle slung across his back looked as weathered as he did. Just another old rancher's tool to most eyes. But like its owner, the weapon held secrets. The barrel was pristine, the action recently oiled, the scope zeroed to perfection. Old habits died hard, especially for a man who'd spent 4 decades hunting the most dangerous fugitives in American history. McCallister paused at the east fence, his eyes scanning the horizon with practiced ease. Most people would see nothing but Texas scrubland. He saw angles of approach, cover, and concealment, tactical advantages that had kept him alive through countless manhunts. Buck's ears perked up, catching something on the wind. "Yeah, boy," McCallister muttered, noting fresh tire tracks in the dirt road leading to his property. "Seems we've got visitors coming." Back at the ranch house, he settled into his morning routine. Coffee on the porch, watching the sun climb higher. To anyone passing by, he was just another retired rancher starting his day. They wouldn't notice how his rocking chair gave him clear lines of sight in all directions, or how the seemingly random tools scattered around the porch could become weapons in trained hands. Sarah Chen, the local postal carrier, pulled up in her truck right on schedule. At 28, she was new to the route, but she'd quickly become one of the few people McCallister genuinely looked forward to seeing. "Morning, Mr. McCallister," she called out, grabbing his mail. "Brought you those horse magazines you subscribed to, and another letter from the Marshal's service." He accepted the mail with a nod of thanks. Sarah hesitated, then added, "My grandfather wanted me to ask, are you the same McCallister who caught the Carson brothers back in '89? He says he was a deputy in El Paso when you brought them in." A shadow of memory crossed McCallister's face. The Carson brothers, 3 weeks of tracking through the worst heat wave in Texas history, ending in a shootout that had made national headlines. "Long time ago," he said simply. "Different life." Sarah studied him with new interest. "Must be a different McCallister. The one my grandfather talked about was supposed to be some kind of legend. The papers called him Iron Hand. Said he could track a ghost through a sandstorm." McCallister just smiled, the same gentle smile he'd given to hundreds of people over the years. Let them think what they wanted. A legend was just a story people told. Reality was here and now. His ranch, his peace, his chosen retirement. But as Sarah drove away, his hand unconsciously moved to the silver star, buried deep in his desk drawer. 15 years retired, but some instincts never faded. Those tire tracks on the road weren't from local vehicles. Buck had caught an unfamiliar scent. And there was that prison break reported last week. 3 dangerous men who'd killed a guard and vanished into the Texas countryside. McCallister stood, stretching muscles that had seen more action than most. Special forces operators. Time to check the horses, tend to the ranch, maintain the routine. But as he worked, his mind was calculating distances, analyzing terrain, running through scenarios that most people wouldn't even think to consider. Let them come, if they were coming. The old Marshal hadn't lost his edge. He'd just learned to hide it better, like a rattler in the rocks, visible only when it was too late to run. He had his coffee, his dog, his quiet ranch. But beneath that peaceful surface, Iron Hand McCallister was as dangerous as ever. Some things you couldn't retire from, no matter how hard you tried. Some instincts stayed sharp, like the knife he still kept within easy reach, hidden beneath his everyday rancher's tools. The Broken Spur Diner sat at the heart of Miller's Creek, a small town that served as the closest civilization to McCallister's ranch. Sheriff Tom Reeves nursed his 3rd coffee of the morning, watching Sarah Chen slide into the booth across from him. The young postal carrier had that look, the one everyone got when they first started piecing together the truth about their quiet neighbor. "So it is him?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice low despite the near-empty diner. "The Iron Hand McCallister?" Reeves shared a knowing look with May Jenkins, the diner's owner who'd been serving coffee in Miller's Creek for 30 years. She drifted, over coffee pot in hand, clearly interested in the conversation. "Surprised it took you this long to figure it out," May said, topping off their cups. "Though that's how he likes it. Man who brought in the West's most wanted for 4 decades, now he just wants to tend his horses and be left alone." "But the stories," Sarah pressed, "about him tracking the Hawkins gang through the Badlands, the shootout with El Coyote's cartel, the Carson brothers?" "All true," Reeves confirmed, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years in law enforcement. "And those are just the ones that made the papers. Half of what he did never went public. Too sensitive, too dangerous for the general population to know about." May settled into the booth, the morning rush still an hour away. "My late husband was a deputy when McCallister brought down the Taylor Moore outfit. Said he'd never seen anything like it. 5 men had deputies pinned down, hostages, in the bank. McCallister walked in through the front door like he was coming in for a deposit. 2 minutes later, all 5 were in cuffs, and he hadn't fired a single shot." "That's nothing," old Bill Howard called from his usual spot at the counter. The retired rancher had lived in Miller's Creek his whole life. "You folks remember that summer of '95? 3 serial killers escaped federal custody, started targeting small towns across Texas. McCallister tracked all 3 separately, brought them in within a week. FBI's behavioral unit still teaches that case." Sarah shook her head in wonder. "But he's so quiet, gentle even. Helps me change flat tires, gives me gardening tips." "That's McCallister," Reeves nodded. "Never one for glory. Did the job because it needed doing, not for headlines or medals. You know why they called him Iron Hand?" The diner had grown quieter, other patrons drifting closer to hear the story. Even those who knew it never tired of the telling. "Everyone thinks it's because he was tough, unbreakable," the sheriff continued. "But that's not it. Story goes, he was tracking this hitman through South Texas. Real nasty piece of work, killed 3 families. McCallister cornered him in an old warehouse. Hitman takes a shot, hits McCallister in the hand, should have ended his career right there." May picked up the thread. Instead, McCallister switches his gun to his other hand, makes a shot that professional snipers still talk about. Hitman goes down clean as you please. Later, docs want to put a steel plate in his injured hand. McCallister refuses, does his own rehabilitation. 12 weeks later, he's qualifying expert with both hands. After that, Bill added, word got around. You couldn't stop Iron Hand McCallister. Couldn't break him, couldn't shake him, couldn't Escape him. Man was like a force of nature. The bell above the diner door chimed. Conversations died as two strangers walked in, rough-looking men who didn't meet anyone's eyes. They took a booth in the corner, ordered coffee, kept to themselves. "Been seeing more strangers lately," May murmured, standing to attend to her customers. "Ever since that prison break last week." Sheriff Reeves watched the newcomers with professional interest. 3 killers still out there. Papers say they're headed for the border. Sarah glanced out the window toward McCallister's ranch. Should someone warn him? The sheriff's laugh held no humor. "Honey, if those escapees are dumb enough to cross paths with Iron Hand McCallister, they're the ones who need warning." The strangers finished their coffee quickly and left, their rental car kicking up dust as it headed east, toward McCallister's ranch. Sarah started to speak, but Reeves held up a hand. "Let it be," he said quietly. "Man like McCallister, he already knows they're coming. Probably knew before they did. That's the thing about legends. They don't get to be legends by accident." The morning sun climbed higher over Miller's Creek, its light catching the badge on Sheriff Reeves's chest. Somewhere out there, past the town limits, an old Marshal was going about his morning routine, waiting to see what the day would bring. And if trouble was really heading his way, well, some legends never truly retired. They just waited for the right moment to remind people why their names still carried weight in the dark corners of the world. The afternoon sun beat down on Miller's Creek's small sheriff's office as Tom Reeves studied the wanted posters on his desk. 3 faces stared back at him: Victor Reyes, Marcus the Ghost Thompson, and Ray Kincaid. Each had a long history of violence, but together they'd done something no one had managed in 20 years. Escaped from Huntsville State Penitentiary. His phone buzzed. A text from a contact in the state police. "Confirmed sighting 30 miles north, moving south, armed and desperate." Through his window, he watched Sarah Chen's postal truck return from her route. She hurried into his office, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by concern. "Sheriff, those men from the diner. I saw their car parked at the old Wallace place. They were talking to someone in a black SUV." Reeves's jaw tightened. The Wallace place was abandoned, perfectly positioned to watch traffic heading toward McCallister's ranch. "Get Judge Martinez on the phone," he told his deputy. "We need warrants ready." "Sir," the deputy hesitated, "shouldn't we warn McCallister?" Before Reeves could answer, May Jenkins burst in from the diner next door. "Tom, you need to see this." She held up her phone, showing a news alert. Prison break wasn't random. Someone helped them out. Professional job. They're saying it might be connected to the Sawyer case. The name hit like a thunderbolt. 15 years ago, McCallister's last case before retirement, Gordon Sawyer, the mastermind behind a string of brutal bank robberies. Iron Hand had brought him in, but Sawyer's network was never fully dismantled. The case had cost McCallister more than just peace of mind. "Sawyer's up for parole next month," Reeves muttered, pieces falling into place. After what McCallister did to his organization, they're not running to Mexico, Sarah realized. They're here for revenge. Out on the street, more unfamiliar vehicles rolled through town. Dirty trucks with out-of-state plates, suspicious sedans with tinted windows, like vultures circling, drawn by the scent of coming violence. Bill Howard hobbled in, his ranchers, instincts on high alert, getting reports from outlying farms, strangers asking questions about McCallister's place, testing response times, professional-like. Reeves reached for his phone, then stopped. McCallister's words from years ago echoed in his memory. "You see trouble coming my way, Tom. Let it come. Sometimes the only way to finish old business is to let it find you." The old Marshal had known this day was coming. 15 years of quiet retirement, but he'd been preparing all along. The ranch's strategic location, the maintained vigilance, the carefully cultivated image of a harmless old rancher. It wasn't retirement. It was an ambush in the making. Sarah grabbed her postal bag. "I need to finish my route." Her eyes said what her voice didn't. She had to warn McCallister. "Sarah," Reeves called after her. "Just remember, that ranch might look like easy pickings to those boys, but Iron Hand McCallister didn't choose it by accident. Every approach is visible for miles. Every escape route can be cut off. He's been setting this trap for 15 years, just waiting for someone dumb enough to walk into it." Thunder rumbled in the distance as storm clouds gathered over the Texas hills, but the weather wasn't what had Miller's Creek holding its breath. They'd lived with a legend in their midst for 15 years, seen him tend his ranch and help his neighbors, almost forgotten what he used to be. Now the past was racing toward them like an approaching storm. Somewhere out there, 3 escaped killers and their mysterious backers thought they'd found an easy target, an old lawman, long retired, vulnerable, and alone. They were about to learn what the worst criminals in Texas history had discovered. The hard way. Iron Hand McCallister hadn't survived 4 decades hunting America's most dangerous fugitives by being an easy target. He'd survived by being the most dangerous man in any room, even when he looked like the least threatening. Storm was coming, and Miller's Creek could only watch and wait, knowing they were about to witness firsthand why some legends never truly retired. They just waited patiently for the right moment to remind the world why they became legends in the first place. Night fell over McCallister's ranch like a velvet curtain, bringing with it a silence that would have seemed peaceful to most. But Iron Hand McCallister wasn't most people. He sat in darkness on his porch, Buck lying quietly at his feet, both of them watching the approach of 3 shadows that thought they were being stealthy. Victor Reyes, the prison break's mastermind, led the trio across the moonlit pasture. Marcus Thompson, nicknamed the Ghost for his ability to break into anywhere, moved on the right. Ray Kincaid, their muscle, took the left. They'd watched the ranch all day. 1 old man, 1 old dog, no visitors. Easy pickings. McCallister's hand rested on Buck's head, keeping the dog silent. His other hand held a cup of coffee, stone cold now. He'd known they were coming since they'd started their surveillance that morning. Amateurs watching a professional, thinking they were invisible. "Lights are out," Reyes whispered into his radio. "Old man's asleep, moving to phase 1. The response crackled back. "Remember the client's instructions. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Get what we came for first." Thompson made quick work of the back door's lock, while Kincaid kept watch. They'd done their homework. No alarm system, no security cameras, nothing but basic ranch house locks. It almost seemed too easy. Inside, they moved with practiced coordination. Thompson headed for the study, Kincaid for the bedroom, Reyes checking the living room. Their flashlights revealed a simple home. Worn furniture, family photos, the basic comforts of a retired rancher. In the study, Thompson's lockpicks made short work of the desk drawer. Inside lay what looked like their target, an old U.S. Marshal's badge, silver star still gleaming after all these years. He reached for it. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you." The voice came from the darkness, calm as a summer breeze. McCallister sat in the corner, barely visible, that cold coffee still in his hand. Before Thompson could react, before he could even process how the old man had gotten there without him noticing, McCallister's other hand moved. The throw was perfect. Decades of practice made muscle memory. The coffee cup hit Thompson's wrist with surgical precision, numbing his gun hand. His pistol clattered to the floor as McCallister rose from his chair, moving with the fluid grace of a much younger man. "Your friend in the bedroom," McCallister said conversationally. "He's about to find out why you don't step on the 3rd floorboard." From the door, on cue, a crash echoed from the bedroom, followed by a muffled curse as Kincaid found the trap McCallister had set 15 years ago and maintained every month since. "And Mr. Reyes," McCallister continued, "might want to reconsider opening that cabinet in the living room. Hate to see a man lose fingers to a custom-built spring trap." Reyes's voice carried through the darkness. "How do you know my name?" "Same way I know who sent you. Same way I knew you were coming." McCallister's voice hardened slightly. Same. Where I know this isn't about robbery. It's about Gordon Sawyer. A tense silence fell. In the bedroom, Kincaid struggled with the simple but effective trap that had snared his ankle. In the living room, Reyes's breath caught at the mention of their client's name. Here's what happens next, McCallister said, still not moving from his position. Your backup team outside is about to have vehicle trouble, sugar in the gas tank. Amazing what a man can do while folks think they're being sneaky watching his place. The police response time to this area is 18 minutes. You've got about 5 to make a choice. Thompson found his voice. What choice? Leave now. Tell Sawyer you failed. McCallister let the alternative hang in the air, unspoken but clear, as crystal. A floorboard creaked as Reyes moved toward the study, gun drawn, but McCallister wasn't there anymore. Somehow in the darkness he'd vanished like smoke. His voice drifted from somewhere else in the house. 3 minutes now. Clock's ticking. The 3 criminals exchanged glances, professional confidence shaken. They'd come expecting an easy score, a simple job to earn Sawyer's favor. Instead, they'd walked into... what? A trap? A test? A demonstration of why iron and McCallister's reputation still carried weight after all these years. 1 minute, McCallister's voice came again, now from a different direction. Might want to make that choice soon. Buck gets awful unfriendly after midnight. A low growl from the darkness emphasized his point. They ran. Not in coordination, not with professional precision, but with the desperate speed of men who'd suddenly realized they were not the predators in this situation, but the prey. Behind them, McCallister stepped onto his porch, watching their retreat through the darkness. He picked up his fallen coffee cup, unbroken despite its use as an improvised weapon. "Best go tell Gordon," he called after them, his voice carrying easily across the night air, "that Iron Hand sends his regards. And remind him, 15 years ago wasn't luck. It was mercy." As their running footsteps faded, McCallister scratched Buck's ears. "Good boy," he murmured. "But they'll be back, with better plans and more men." The old Marshal smiled slightly, the kind of smile that had made hardened killers rethink their life choices. Good. The abandoned Wallace place creaked in the pre-dawn darkness as Victor Reyes paced the dusty floorboards. Their backup team's disabled vehicles had been towed to avoid police attention, and now the reality of their failure hung heavy in the musty air. "He knew," Reyes muttered, running his hands through his hair. "Somehow that old man knew everything. Our names, our plan, even about Sawyer." Marcus Thompson nursed his bruised wrist where McCallister's coffee cup had struck with surgical precision. That wasn't normal, the way he moved in the dark, how he seemed to be everywhere at once. Nobody that age moves like that. Ray Kincaid limped in from outside, still angry about the trap that had caught him. "Found something you both need to see?" He dropped a stack of old newspaper clippings on the table. "Been doing research on our simple rancher at the library." The yellowed headlines told a story that made their blood run cold. "Iron Hand strikes again. 5-state manhunt ends in 48 hours. Marshal McCallister brings down border cartel single-handed. The legend of Iron Hand, America's greatest manhunter." "Look at the dates," Kincaid pointed. 4 decades of this. The man wasn't just a marshal. He was the marshal, the one they sent when nobody else could get the job done. The burner phone rang, making them all jump. Reyes answered, putting it on speaker. Gordon Sawyer's voice filled the room, smooth as aged whiskey, but with an edge that reminded them why he'd ruled Texas's criminal underworld for 20 years. "I'm hearing reports of failure, gentlemen." "Sawyer, listen," Reyes started. "McCallister, he's not what we thought. He was waiting for us. Had traps set up, knew our names." "Of course he did." Sawyer's laugh held no humor. "Why do you think I spent 15 years planning this? Why do you think I arranged your escape, specifically? Iron Hand McCallister didn't just catch me. He dismantled my entire organization. Piece by piece, name by name. The only one he didn't kill or capture was my son. A heavy silence fell. Thompson was the first to connect the dots. The client, your boy's running things now? Michael's been rebuilding what McCallister destroyed, waiting for the right moment. And now that I'm up for parole next month, it's time to tie up loose ends. McCallister's been playing the harmless rancher, but we knew he had to have kept evidence from the old days. Files, names, proof that could stop our resurrection before it starts. Reyes studied the newspaper photos. McCallister, in his prime, the legendary Marshal who'd broken the back of organized crime across 5 states. So tonight wasn't about robbery. We were supposed to find something specific. My case files, Sawyer confirmed. McCallister kept detailed records of every operation, names, dates, connections, everything. Find those files, destroy them, and make sure the old Marshal can't testify at my parole hearing. Do that, and Michael will make you rich. Fail. The threat hung unspoken. He's not just some retired lawman, Kincaid protested. You should have seen him tonight. Man's got the whole ranch rigged, moves like a shadow. Then burn it down, Sawyer cut in. Bring in more men. I don't care how you do it, but Iron Hand McCallister and those files don't survive the week. Michael's already calling in professionals. Real operators who won't be scared off by an old man's reputation. After Sawyer hung up, the 3 escapees looked at each other. They'd wanted freedom, a big score, a chance to write their own legends. Instead, they'd become pawns in a 15-year-old vendetta between a criminal mastermind and the lawman who'd brought him down. We could run, Thompson suggested. Head for Mexico like everyone thinks. Reyes shook his head, looking at the newspaper. And photos again. One showed McCallister standing over a captured Sawyer, that silver star catching the light. No, Sawyer would find us. Only way out is through. We take down Iron Hand, find those files, we're set for life. And if we fail, Kincaid. Reyes's laugh was bitter. Then we get to find out firsthand how Iron Hand McCallister became a legend in the first place. As dawn broke over the Texas hills, they began to plan. Not a simple robbery this time, but a war against a man who'd spent his life hunting men. Like them. They had no choice now. It was their legacy against his legend, and legends, they were about to discover, had a way of reminding people why they became legends in the first place. McCallister stood in his study at first light, the wall before him covered in photographs and notes, 15 years of quiet preparation exposed. News clippings about Gordon Sawyer's organization, surveillance photos of Michael Sawyer's operations, carefully mapped connections that nobody knew he'd been tracking all along. Time to move, Buck, he murmured to his dog. Can't play defense forever. His burner phone, one that hadn't been used in years, connected to a number few people knew existed. Tom, Iron Hand, remember that favor you owe me from El Paso? Sheriff. Reeves's voice came back instantly alert. Been wondering when you'd call that in. Need everything you've got on recent arrivals in town. Vehicle registrations, credit card traces, hotel bookings. They'll be using aliases, but they'll follow patterns. Already on it. Sarah's been tracking suspicious mail deliveries. May's keeping logs of diner customers. Town's been waiting for your signal. McCallister allowed himself a small smile. He'd chosen Miller's Creek for more than just its tactical advantages. Small towns had long memories and longer loyalties. Got something else, Reeves continued. State police intercepted a weapons shipment last night. Professional gear, military grade, heading toward the Wallace place before the drivers mysteriously got lost. They're calling in professionals, McCallister noted. Good. Professionals leave traces, paper trails, patterns. He hung up and moved to his gun safe, hidden behind a false panel. Inside wasn't just weapons, but tools he hadn't touched since retiring, specialized equipment that had helped build his legend. The silver Marshal's badge caught the morning light. Most thought that was what the escapees had come for, a trophy, to prove their victory. They hadn't noticed the real prize, a small key hanging on a chain beneath it, one that opened a hidden safe in the ranch's old storm cellar. Down in the cellar, McCallister opened a dusty filing cabinet. Inside were the files Gordon Sawyer thought would save him, detailed records of every operation, every connection, every crime. But more importantly, there were files on Michael Sawyer's new organization, built piece by piece over 15 years of patient observation. "Your daddy never understood, Michael," McCallister said to the photographs. "Manhunting isn't about force, it's about patience, observation, letting your prey think they're the predator until it's too late." His phone buzzed. Sarah Chen, right on schedule. "Mr. McCallister, 3 more suspicious packages arrived at different addresses, all matching the pattern you described." "Good work, Sarah. Keep tracking them. They'll lead us to their staging areas." He knew what was coming. Michael Sawyer would send professionals, men with military or federal experience, the kind who knew how to plan assaults and coordinate attacks. They'd come heavily armed, well-trained, confident in their superior numbers and modern tactics, just like the Carson brothers had, just like El Coyote's cartel, just like every other outfit that had underestimated an old Marshal's ability to turn their own tactics against them. Buck's growl alerted him to movement at the property line. High-end SUVs with tinted windows, doing their best to look like innocent. Tourists lost in the Texas countryside. Professional reconnaissance, gathering intel for the coming assault. McCallister watched them through his scope, noting faces, vehicles, patterns. Each observation went into his mental file, pieces of a puzzle he'd been assembling since Gordon Sawyer first went to prison. "Sir?" Sarah's voice came through his earpiece. "May says there's a stranger at the diner asking questions about your ranch. Says he's a real estate developer. Let him ask," McCallister replied. "Sometimes the best way to catch a snake is to let it think it's hidden in the grass." He returned to his wall of intelligence, adding new photos, connecting new threads. Michael Sawyer thought he was orchestrating a calculated takedown of a retired lawman. Instead, he was walking his entire organization into the jaws of a trap, 15 years in the making. Iron Hand McCallister hadn't spent his retirement simply tending horses and fixing fences. He'd been preparing, watching, waiting for the day when the ghosts of his last case would come calling. Now that day had arrived, and he was ready to remind them why some legends never truly retired. They'd come at him with modern tactics, superior numbers, and high-tech equipment. He'd counter with 4 decades of experience, a lifetime of man-hunting skills, and a network of loyal allies they'd never see coming. The game was on, and McCallister was done playing defense. Time to show Michael Sawyer why his father still woke up screaming at the mention of Iron Hand's name. The old case files spread across McCallister's kitchen table told a story in bullets and blood. 15 years ago, the Sawyer organization had been the most sophisticated criminal enterprise in Texas history. Not just bank robberies, but political corruption, corporate fraud, and murder for hire. Gordon Sawyer had built an empire that law enforcement couldn't touch, until Iron Hand came hunting. McCallister studied a particular photograph, Gordon Sawyer's mansion the night of the final raid. In the foreground, a teenage Michael Sawyer watched as his father was led away in handcuffs. The boy's eyes held something more dangerous than hatred, promise. "Should have seen it coming," McCallister muttered to Buck. Boy spent 15 years building his own empire, smarter than his father's, more careful, more patient. A knock at the door. Sheriff Reeves entered, carrying a thick folder. "Found something you need to see. That weapon shipment we intercepted led us to financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts, all leading back to legitimate businesses. Michael learned from his father's mistakes." McCallister nodded. "Gordon built an empire of criminals. Michael built one that looks legal on paper." "There's more." Reeves hesitated. "Remember Angela Martinez?" McCallister's hand unconsciously moved to the scar on his left shoulder. Angela Martinez had been his partner during the Sawyer investigation, one of the finest marshals he'd ever known. She died in the final raid, not from Gordon's men, but from a shot that had seemed like a terrible accident. Found this in the cold case files. Reeves laid down a ballistics report. That shot that killed Angela, match finally came back. Custom round, high-end rifle. The kind a 15-year-old might have had access to, living in his father's mansion with its private shooting range. The implications hit hard. Michael Sawyer hadn't just watched his father's arrest, he'd taken his own revenge, killing the female marshal who'd helped bring down his family. He was just a kid, McCallister said quietly. Never even considered. That's not all. Reeves spread out more photos. These are from Michael's current operation. Look familiar? The tactical setups, the equipment positioning, the operational patterns, they were identical to the techniques Angela had specialized in. Techniques she'd taught McCallister, making them an unbeatable team. He's been studying us, McCallister realized, not just planning revenge, but learning our methods, using Angela's own tactics against us. Buck's growl interrupted them. Through the window, they spotted 3 more SUVs doing a slow drive-by, not even trying to be subtle now. They're getting bolder, Reeves observed. No, McCallister corrected. They're getting desperate. Gordon's parole hearing is in 2 weeks. Michael needs those files destroyed and me silenced before then. Otherwise everything he's built comes crashing down. The sheriff studied his old friend. You're not just going to stop them, are you? This is about finishing what started 15 years ago. McCallister's eyes were hard as Texas bedrock. Michael Sawyer killed my partner, Tom, used what he learned. From that to build something worse than his father ever dreamed of. Been watching him all these years, gathering evidence, waiting for him to make his move. The files they're after. They're not just about Gordon's old operation. Everything's in there. Every connection Michael's made, every corrupt official he's bought, every murder he's ordered. Enough to bring down his entire organization and put him away longer than his father. Reeves whistled low. No wonder he's calling in professional muscle. This isn't just about revenge anymore. Never was. McCallister moved to his gun safe. This is about justice. For Angela. For everyone the Sawyers have hurt. Michael thinks he's springing a trap 15 years in the making. Doesn't realize I've been setting my own. The sheriff's radio crackled. Multiple reports of armed men gathering at the Wallace place, heavy weapons, professional operators, the kind of force you'd use to take down a fortified position. They're done playing games, Reeves said. McCallister checked his old service weapon, the one that had helped build his legend. Good, neither am I. As the sun set over his ranch, Iron Hand McCallister prepared for war. Not just against mercenaries and escaped convicts, but against the ghosts of his past. Against a young man who'd spent 15 years learning how to kill. The legend who'd destroyed his family. They'd come with modern tactics and superior numbers. He'd counter with decades of experience and a revenge 15 years cold. Time to show Michael Sawyer that some debts can only be paid in blood. And some legends earn their names the hard way. Miller's Creek had never seen anything like it. Strangers in tactical gear moving through town in expensive SUVs. Unmarked trucks delivering equipment to the Wallace place. Professional killers trying to look like ordinary tourists, failing miserably. In a town where everybody knew everybody. But what they didn't notice was how the town was watching back. May Jenkins' diner had become an unofficial intelligence hub. Every stranger's order, conversation, and movement logged by her sharp-eyed waitresses. Sarah Chen's postal route now included careful documentation of every suspicious package and mail drop. Even old Bill Howard's morning coffee group of retired ranchers had organized a network of rural surveillance, their pickup trucks and binoculars keeping watch over every back road and trail. McCallister stood in Sheriff Reeves's office, studying the map they'd created. Red pins marked confirmed mercenary positions. Blue showed suspected cache locations. Yellow tracked vehicle movements. "They're setting up a full tactical operation," Reeves observed. "Professional kill teams at every approach to your ranch. Surveillance on all access roads. These aren't common criminals anymore." "No," McCallister agreed. "These are federal-trained operators. Private military contractors. The kind of men who think tactical gear and modern weapons make them invincible." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "Same kind of men I used to hunt." Sarah burst in, holding her tablet. "Mr. McCallister, remember those suspicious packages I've been tracking? Just matched 3 of the return addresses to shell companies linked to Michael Sawyer's legitimate businesses." "Good work." McCallister added new pins to the map. "There. Staging equipment drops, building supply lines. Professional operation requires professional logistics." "Got more?" May called from the doorway. 2 of their advance men were in for breakfast. "Overheard them talking about some kind of timeline, something big happening 3 days before Gordon's parole hearing." McCallister nodded. "Michael's planning this like a military operation. Establish superiority, eliminate the target, destroy the evidence, all with enough time to clean up before his father's hearing." "What's our play?" Reeves asked. "They expect me to stay defensive, protect the ranch. Instead—" McCallister moved, several pins on the map. "We're going to let them think their plan is working. While they focus on the ranch, we'll be dismantling their support structure piece by piece." He turned to Sarah. "Those equipment drops they're expecting, they're going to start going missing. Wrong addresses, lost shipments, paperwork delays." May grinned. "My customers might start noticing health code violations at certain properties, calling in inspectors at inconvenient times. Bill's ranchers can make sure some roads become mysteriously impassable," Reeves added. "Amazing how many cattle drives and farm equipment breakdowns can happen at just the wrong moment." McCallister studied his unlikely army. A postal carrier, a diner owner, old ranchers, and small-town deputies, all ready to stand against professional killers. Not with guns or tactical gear, but with the kind of strategic thinking that came from knowing every inch of their territory. "They're watching the ranch," he explained, "expecting the legendary Iron Hand to come out shooting. Instead, we're going to show them why I spent 40 years as the most successful manhunter in Texas history, not through force, but through patience, observation, and turning their own plans against them." A deputy rushed in. "Sir, got movement. At the Wallace place. Looks like they're mobilizing for something." Through his binoculars, McCallister watched the professional operators preparing for what they thought would be a decisive strike. Their movements were textbook perfect, their equipment state-of-the-art. They had everything planned, down to the last detail. What they didn't realize was that Iron Hand McCallister had spent 15 years planning too. Every piece was in place, every contingency considered. Michael Sawyer thought he was orchestrating a masterpiece of revenge. Instead, he was about to learn why some legends are better left alone. "Time to remind these boys," McCallister said quietly, "that tactical gear doesn't make the warrior, and all their modern training doesn't mean a thing against 40 years of experience hunting men just like them." Miller's Creek prepared for war, not with guns and violence, but with the kind of strategic thinking that had made Iron Hand a legend. The mercenaries were about to learn that sometimes the deadliest predator is the one that lets its prey think they're winning, right up until the trap snaps shut. Night settled over the Texas hills as McCallister made his first move. The mercenaries had established 3 main staging areas around his ranch, each one perfectly positioned according to modern tactical doctrine. Exactly as he'd expected. What they didn't know was that Iron Hand had helped write the book on those tactics, back when he'd trained federal tactical teams between manhunts. Every position they'd chosen was one he'd anticipated 15 years ago when he'd bought the ranch. "Team, one in position," Sarah whispered through his earpiece. The young postal carrier was stationed at the town's water tower with her camera, documenting every movement. "They're rotating guards exactly like you said they would." McCallister moved like a shadow through his property's northern edge. Buck stayed at the ranch house, a calculated absence that would tell the observers their target was home for the night. Let them watch the house. The real action was elsewhere. "Got eyes on their command center?" May reported from her diner. The evening shift had a perfect view of the Wallace place. 4 SUVs just arrived. Looks like their leadership. "Right on schedule," McCallister murmured. Professional operators loved their patterns, their procedures, made them predictable. He reached the first cache he'd buried years ago, a waterproof container hidden beneath an old fence post. Inside was everything he needed, specialized equipment that would have raised questions if found in his house, but that no one would think to look for out here. A memory flashed. Angela showing him how to use this same equipment to track cartel. Radio communications. "Sometimes the best weapon isn't a gun," she'd said. "It's knowing what your enemy is going to do before they do it." She'd been right then. She was still right now. The mercenaries were using encrypted communications, military-grade stuff that they thought was secure. They didn't realize their command vehicle was parked right where McCallister had buried a passive signal interceptor 15 years ago, maintained every month since under the guise of routine fence repairs. Their voices crackled through his earpiece. "Team 2, set for night observation." "Command, we've got movement at the house. Maintain positions. Alpha team prep for tomorrow's." Insertion. Sheriff Reeves's voice cut in on a different channel. "Got those files you asked for. Michael Sawyer's shell companies own half the properties they're using. Boyd's gotten sloppy, leaving paper trails." "He's his father's son," McCallister replied. "Gordon always thought he was smarter than everyone else, too. That's how I caught him." The memory of that night surged back, the final raid on Gordon's mansion. Angela taking her position, not knowing that a teenage Michael had her in his sights. The shot that everyone thought was a random tragedy. "You've got visitors," Sarah reported suddenly. "Black sedan approaching from the east, different from their usual vehicles." McCallister switched positions, moving to higher ground. Through his scope, he watched the sedan stop at the Wallace place. 2 men emerged, one he recognized instantly. "Hello, Michael," he whispered, watching Gordon Sawyer's son step into the light. 15 years had turned the angry teenager into a cold-eyed businessman, but McCallister could still see the boy who'd taken his first life that night, killing a U.S. Marshal with a shot no one suspected came from him. "Command, this is McCallister." He spoke into his radio. "Target confirmed. Michael Sawyer on site." "You want me to send deputies?" Reeves asked. "Negative. Let him think he's safe. Man shows up in person means he's worried, means we're already under his skin." Through his scope, McCallister watched Michael studying satellite photos of the ranch. The boy had learned well, planned carefully, thought of almost everything. Almost. "Sarah, initiate Phase 1, McCallister ordered. "Let's show these professionals what happens when they bring their tactical doctrine to Iron Hand's hunting ground." Across Miller's Creek, lights began going out. Power fluctuations, phone lines dropping, radio interference, all appearing random, all carefully orchestrated. The mercenaries' sophisticated equipment began experiencing mysterious failures, their communications growing spotty. "Sometimes," McCallister quoted softly, remembering Angela's words, "the best weapon is letting your enemy think they're in control." In the command center, Michael Sawyer was about to learn that hunting Iron Hand McCallister wasn't just dangerous. It was exactly what the old Marshal had spent 15 years preparing for. The ghost of Angela Martinez would soon have her justice. But first, McCallister was going to remind these modern operators why some legends are built on more than just stories. They're built on decades of experience, patience, and the kind of strategic thinking that no amount of tactical gear can match. The mercenaries made their move at midnight. 3 tactical teams, 12 men each, approaching McCallister's ranch with night vision gear and suppressed weapons. Their movement was perfect, their coordination flawless. Everything went exactly according to plan. That should have been their first warning. "They've cut the power," Sarah reported from her observation post. "All teams converging on the house." McCallister's voice came back calm and steady. "Right where we want them. Initiate containment." Across the property, carefully prepared measures activated. Irrigation systems suddenly engaged, turning firm ground into mud. Solar-powered lights clicked on at precisely the wrong moments, ruining night vision effectiveness. Every advantage the mercenaries thought they had began to disappear. "What the hell?" The team leader's frustrated voice crackled through McCallister's intercepted communications. "Our intel showed none of this. Where's our thermal imaging?" They didn't realize every approach to the house had been prepared over 15 years. Every modern tactic they employed had a low-tech counter already in place. Iron Hand hadn't spent his retirement simply farming. Michael Sawyer watched through high-end optics from his command post, growing increasingly frustrated as his professional operators were systematically stripped of their advantages. "Where is he? The house is dark, thermals showing nothing." "Looking in the wrong place, boy." McCallister's voice came through their command channel, shocking them all. "Just like your father always did." The first team reached the house, breaching with textbook precision, only to find the building empty. No furniture, no target, nothing but carefully positioned mirrors and LED strips that had fooled their thermal imaging. "It's a trap!" the team leader shouted, but it was too late. The ranch house's front door slammed shut behind them, reinforced. Steel beneath its wooden exterior. The windows, similarly strengthened, locked into place. In seconds, the tactical team found themselves sealed inside what had appeared to be a simple ranch house. "You boys comfortable in there?" McCallister's voice came through their radios again. "Might want to tell your friends outside to reconsider their positions." The other 2 teams were already scrambling, professional discipline cracking as they realized they'd lost contact with command. Their encrypted communications were compromised, their night vision was useless, and their carefully planned assault had just been turned against them. "Enough games!" Michael's voice shook with rage. "Show yourself, Iron Hand." "Behind you." Michael spun to find McCallister standing in the open door of their command vehicle, Buck at his side. Nobody had seen or heard him approach. None of their security had spotted him. The legend of Iron Hand suddenly felt very real. "Been a long time, Michael," McCallister said quietly. "You've grown, but you still make the same mistakes your father did. Too proud to see what's right in front of you." Michael drew his weapon, but McCallister was already moving. The boy had youth and training, but he was facing a man who'd spent 40 years perfecting the art of close-quarters combat. The gun went flying, and Michael found himself pinned against the vehicle's side. "I know it was you," McCallister said, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of certainty. "The shot that killed Angela, 40 years hunting men. I know what a professional hit looks like versus a teenager with his dad's custom rifle." "She deserved it," Michael spat. "She helped you destroy my family." "Your father destroyed your family, boy. I just exposed what he'd built. Now you've built something worse, thinking you're smarter, more careful. But you made one critical mistake." "Yeah? What's that?" McCallister's smile was cold as Texas steel. "You came hunting a legend without understanding why he became one." Shots erupted as the remaining tactical teams tried to rescue their boss. But McCallister had already vanished into the darkness, leaving Michael handcuffed to his own command vehicle. Around the property, the professional operators found themselves caught in prepared kill zones, their modern tactics useless against decades of manhunting experience. "All teams, stand down," Michael finally ordered, his voice shaking. "Fall back to secondary positions." As the mercenaries retreated, leaving their trapped comrades in the sealed ranch house, McCallister's voice came through their comms one last time. "Next time you come back, boy, bring better men. These professionals of yours, they're too used to fighting soldiers, never learned how to deal with a hunter." In the command vehicle, Michael Sawyer finally understood what his father had warned him about. Iron Hand McCallister hadn't earned his legend with fancy tactics or superior firepower. He'd earned it by being the most patient, methodical, and cunning manhunter Texas had ever seen. The real war was just beginning, but its first major battle had gone to the legend, reminding everyone why some reputations are built on more than just stories. Dawn found McCallister in his storm cellar, studying files he hadn't touched in 15 years. The trapped mercenaries had been released into police custody, their expensive equipment confiscated, but something wasn't adding up. "Too easy," he muttered to Buck. "Michael's smarter than this. That assault wasn't meant to succeed." His phone buzzed. Sarah Chen, her voice tense. "Mr. McCallister, remember those suspicious packages I've been tracking? Just found a pattern. They weren't equipment drops at all. They were testing our surveillance, mapping our response patterns." A cold realization hit just as Sheriff Reeves burst in. "Got an alert from the FBI? Gordon Sawyer's parole hearing? It's been moved up. Happening tomorrow, not next week." "That's what last night was about," McCallister said grimly. "A distraction, making us focus on the ranch while something bigger was happening." He spread out the old case files, seeing them with new eyes. Patterns emerged: shell companies, property deals, political connections. Michael hadn't just rebuilt his father's criminal empire, he'd created something far more insidious. "Tom, pull up everything on Judge Harrison." The sheriff worked his tablet. "The one handling Gordon's parole hearing? Clean record, 20 years. On the bench, wait, his daughter's medical bills, all paid through a charitable foundation. Let me guess, connected to one of Michael's companies." "How'd you know?" McCallister pulled out more files. "Because that's what this was always about. Not just revenge, not just destroying evidence. Michael's built something bigger than his father ever dreamed. A network of corrupted officials, compromised judges, bought politicians. The parole hearing's just the start." Sarah's voice crackled through the radio. "Movement at the Wallace place. They're packing up, moving out fast, because they don't need to take the ranch anymore," McCallister realized. "The assault was theater, making us think this was about personal revenge. Meanwhile, Michael's got a judge in his pocket, ready to release Gordon tomorrow into a system they've already corrupted." Reeves studied the evidence spreading across the table. My God, they're not trying to rebuild the old Sawyer organization. They're trying to take over the entire state's legal system. 15 years of patient work, McCallister nodded. Buying judges, corrupting officials, placing their people in key positions. Gordon goes free tomorrow, returns to what looks like a legitimate business empire. Nobody looks deeper. Nobody sees the cancer growing inside the system itself. His hand touched Angela's badge, still preserved in its case. That's why she had to die. She wasn't just helping take down Gordon's empire. She was getting too close to their long-term plan. "Sir," Sarah's voice again, "just intercepted a call. Michael's heading to Austin. Some kind of private meeting before tomorrow's hearing." McCallister's eyes hardened. Decades of manhunting experience crystallized into sudden clarity. The real target was never the ranch or the files. It's the system itself. They're not trying to destroy evidence of the past. They're trying to prevent anyone from seeing what they're about to do to the future. He turned to Reeves. "How fast can you get me everything on every judge, official and politician connected to Gordon's case?" "Already on it. But McCallister, this is bigger than one old Marshal. We're talking about corruption at the highest levels." "Good thing I didn't spend retirement just farming then." McCallister opened a hidden panel, revealing walls of files and evidence he'd spent 15 years collecting. Michael thinks he's patient. He's about to learn why Iron Hand was the most feared manhunter in Texas history. Sarah's voice carried new urgency. More vehicles leaving town. Looks like they're all heading to Austin. Let them go, McCallister said, checking his weapon. They think tomorrow's hearing is their victory lap. Instead, it's going to be their last mistake. The morning sun painted Texas in shades of gold and shadow as Iron Hand McCallister prepared for one last hunt. Not just for escaped convicts or hired killers, but for something far more dangerous. Corruption that threatened the very foundations of justice itself. Michael Sawyer thought he'd orchestrated the perfect plan. He was about to learn why some legends are better left in retirement, because when they do come back, they come back with decades of experience and nothing left to lose. The highway to Austin stretched through the Texas landscape like a black ribbon as McCallister's truck ate up the miles. Next to him, Sheriff Reeves worked his phone, calling in 15 years' worth of favors. In the back seat, Sarah Chen sorted through files, her Postal Service badge replaced by something new, a temporary deputy's star. FBI's got the files you sent, Reeves reported. Judge Harrison's been quietly removed from tomorrow's hearing. But Michael's already got a backup plan. Judge Carlton's been assigned the case. Carlton. McCallister's hands tightened on the wheel. Angela investigated him before she died. Nothing concrete, but she suspected he was on Gordon's payroll. Got something, Sarah called from the back. Carlton's rulings over the past 5 years. Every case connected to Michael's businesses got favorable treatment. Too subtle to spot, unless you're looking for the pattern. Buck's ears perked up as a series of black SUVs passed them heading south, Michael's mercenaries, repositioning for whatever he had planned next. They're not even trying to hide anymore, Reeves observed, because they think they've already won. McCallister checked his rearview mirror. Michael spent 15 years building this network. Even if we stop tomorrow's hearing, he's got backup judges, alternate plans. Like cutting off a hydra's head, 2 more grow back. His phone buzzed. May Jenkins back in Miller's Creek. Got visitors at the diner, state officials, asking questions about you, but something's off about them. Michael's people, McCallister confirmed. Making sure I'm still focused on the ranch while they move their pieces into place. Sarah looked up from her files. Why now? After 15 years, why risk everything on this play? Because of what's coming. McCallister pulled out an old notebook. Angela's case notes, preserved all these years. 3 months from now, the state's implementing a new digital justice system. Every case, every ruling, every financial transaction tracked and transparent. Michael's network only works in the shadows. Once that system goes live, they lose their advantage, Reeves finished. So they need Gordon free now, need their puppet judges and corrupt officials in place before the sunlight hits. Exactly. Tomorrow's hearing isn't just about freeing Gordon. It's about legitimizing their whole operation before anyone can look too closely. A text from Bill Howard lit up McCallister's phone. Strangers asking around town about old case files. Professional types. They're searching for the evidence, Sarah realized. The files that could expose their network. Let them search. McCallister allowed himself a grim smile. Those files haven't been in the ranch for years. Every piece of evidence, every connection I've traced, every corrupt official I've identified, it's all been moved to secure locations. Dead drops Angela taught me how to use. Reeves studied his old friend. You've been planning for this moment since she died. Longer than that. Angela saw it coming, saw how deep the corruption went. That's why she had to die, not just because she helped catch Gordon, but because she understood what Michael was building even then. The Austin skyline appeared on the horizon as the sun began to set. Somewhere in that city, Michael Sawyer was gathering his forces, thinking he was about to complete a 15-year masterpiece of revenge and corruption. May reports more vehicles heading toward Austin, Sarah said. They're mobilizing everything. They have. Good. McCallister's voice carried the weight of 40 years hunting men who thought they were above the law. Time they learned why Iron Hand became more than just a nickname. Some debts can only be paid in full. He pulled out Angela's old badge, kept close all these years. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about stopping a corrupt system, it would be about finishing what she'd started, about showing Michael Sawyer that killing a U.S. Marshal might take a moment. But her legacy could haunt you forever. The Texas sun painted the sky blood red as Iron Hand McCallister prepared for one last hunt. Not just for justice, but for revenge served cold as desert night and patient as Texas limestone. Michael thought he was patient. He was about to learn what real patience looked like, the kind that waited 15 years to spring a trap. Austin's federal courthouse loomed against the darkening sky, its marble columns casting long shadows across the plaza. From his vantage point in a coffee shop across the street, McCallister watched Michael Sawyer's pieces moving into position. Private security teams disguised as courthouse personnel, corrupt officials arriving for early meetings. Every entrance and exit covered by professionals who thought they were prepared for anything. Latest intel, Sarah reported, sliding into the booth dressed in business attire that made her look like just another courthouse employee. Gordon's being transferred from Huntsville now, heavily guarded convoy, but half the guards are Michael's people. Judge Carlton's chambers are locked. Down, Reeves added from his position near the courthouse steps. Man's got more security than the governor. They're not taking any chances after Harrison got pulled. McCallister sipped his coffee, mind working through decades of manhunting experience. They think they're protecting their operation. Instead, they're trapping themselves exactly where we want them. His phone buzzed. May Jenkins back in Miller's Creek. Those state officials asking questions? Just confirmed they're former federal agents now working private sector. Michael's got people watching your ranch, waiting for you to show up there. Let them watch. McCallister's eyes tracked another security team entering the courthouse. How many favors did you call in, Tom? Everyone, the sheriff replied. Got FBI surveillance teams standing by. Texas Rangers positioned as maintenance workers, even some of your old Marshal buddies who worked the Sawyer case. Everyone you've helped over 40 years, they're all here. Sarah spread out building plans. On the table, carefully annotated with security positions. Michael's got the whole courthouse locked down, professional teams at every access point. They're expecting you to come in shooting, try to stop the hearing by force, just like his father would have done. McCallister allowed himself a small smile. Boy still doesn't understand. Iron Hand didn't become a legend by outgunning people. He did it by outthinking them. Buck's low growl alerted them to movement. A black SUV pulled up, and Michael Sawyer stepped out, surrounded by private security. The young man's confidence was visible in every movement as he climbed the courthouse steps. He's got every angle covered, Reeves observed. Even if we expose Carlton, he's got 3 other judges in his pocket. Try to stop Gordon's transfer, he's got backup routes and safe houses ready, because he thinks this is about stopping the hearing. McCallister's voice carried the weight of 15 years of patience. He doesn't realize the hearing is our trap. He pulled out Angela's notebook, opened to pages of coded notes only he and she had known how to read. Every corrupt judge, every bought official, every compromised cop, they're all going to be in that courthouse tomorrow. Michael spent 15 years building a network of corruption. Tomorrow, he's bringing them all together in one place. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. You're not trying to stop the hearing. You're using it to expose everything at once. Michael wants his father freed, his network legitimized, his revenge complete. Instead, McCallister checked his weapon, more out of habit than necessity. He's about to learn why Iron Hand was the most feared manhunter in Texas, not because of violence, but because once the trap was set, there was no escape. Night fell over Austin as more players arrived at the courthouse. Michael's security teams conducted final sweeps. His corrupt officials made last-minute preparations. His mercenaries took up their positions. Everything was going according to his plan, And in a coffee shop across the street, Iron Hand McCallister watched it all with the patient eyes of a man who'd spent 40 years hunting the worst criminals in America. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about justice for Angela. It would be about showing Michael Sawyer that some legends are built on more than just reputation. They're built on the kind of strategic thinking that turns your enemy's greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. And Michael was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Dawn painted the Austin Courthouse in shades of gold as Gordon Sawyer's transport convoy approached the city. In his command center on the building's third floor, Michael Sawyer watched security feeds with the satisfaction of a man seeing 15 years of planning come to fruition. All teams report ready, his head of security announced. Courthouse is locked down. McCallister's ranch is under surveillance. No sign of movement there. Michael smiled. Of course not. The old man's lost his edge. Probably still thinks he can stop the hearing by proving judicial corruption. Sir, a nervous aide approached. There's something odd. Just got word that several high-level officials have been called in for an emergency meeting. Judge Carlton, Commissioner Hayes, even Director Walsh from the State Bureau. Perfect, Michael replied. Everyone who matters will be here to witness my father's return, to see the legend of Iron Hand finally end. Across the street, McCallister sat in the same coffee shop, now wearing a maintenance worker's uniform. How many of Michael's people took the bait? He asked quietly. Sarah's voice came through his earpiece. Every corrupt official he's got connections to just confirmed they're attending, even ones we didn't know about. They're scared, don't want to be left out of whatever Michael's planning. Rats. Gathering for the feast, Reeves added from his position, not realizing they're walking into the trap. McCallister checked his watch. 1 hour until the hearing. Around the courthouse, Michael's security teams maintained their vigilance. Professional. Operators ready for any threat. They were looking for a frontal assault, for the legendary Iron Hand to come in shooting. None of them noticed the maintenance van that had been parked in the underground garage for 3 days, or the new fiber optic cables that Sarah had helped install last week, disguised as routine upgrades, or the court reporter who'd been quietly replacing standard recording equipment with something much more sophisticated. Transport's 5 minutes out, Sarah reported. Gordon's practically glowing, thinks he's about to walk free into his son's new empire. McCallister touched Angela's badge one last time before tucking it away. Michael spent 15 years building a network of corruption, thinking he was smarter than his father, but he forgot the most important lesson about Iron Hand. Which is? Reeves asked. The best trap isn't the one you see coming. It's the one that's already closed before you know. It exists. Through his earpiece, McCallister heard Michael's security teams conducting final sweeps, each one reporting positions secure, access points covered, contingencies in place. Their confidence was almost palpable. One last chance, Reeves said quietly. We could still try to stop the hearing, go after Michael directly. That's what he's prepared for, McCallister replied. But Iron Hand didn't hunt men by doing what they expected. He did it by letting them think they were winning right up until the moment they lost everything. Gordon's transport convoy appeared on the horizon. Michael's corruption network gathered in the courthouse, eager to witness their triumph. Security teams stood ready for any assault, and in a maintenance uniform across the street, the most legendary manhunter in Texas history allowed himself a small smile. Some traps were built with guns and tactics. Others were built with 15 years of patience and the kind of strategic thinking that turned an enemy's greatest moment of victory into their final defeat. All pieces in position, Sarah confirmed. Time to show Michael, McCallister said quietly, why Iron Hand was always more than just a nickname. It was a promise. The point of no return had arrived. The only question was whether Michael Sawyer would realize his mistake before or after the trap that would destroy everything he'd built snapped shut around him. The courtroom fell silent as Gordon Sawyer walked in, head high, flanked by guards he thought were loyal to his son. Michael sat in the front row, surrounded by his security team, watching his father approach the bench where Judge Carlton waited to deliver his carefully orchestrated freedom. Quite a turnout, Gordon observed, noting the gathered officials, judges, and power brokers who owed their positions to his son's network. Shame Iron Hand isn't here to see it, Michael smiled. Old Man's probably still at his ranch, thinking he can stop this with his outdated tactics. That's when the first part of McCallister's trap snapped shut. Every door in the courthouse locked simultaneously, electronic systems responding to commands programmed days ago. Security feeds switched from Michael's surveillance to channels controlled by Sarah Chen, her postal service experience perfect for infiltrating their communications infrastructure. "What's happening?" Michael demanded as his radio channels dissolved into static. The courthouse's massive display screens flickered to life, showing financial records, secret meetings, evidence of corruption gathered over 15 years. But more importantly, they showed the real-time footage of everyone in the building reacting to being exposed. Iron Hand's voice filled the courthouse speakers. Lesson 1, Michael. The best trap isn't the one you see coming. McCallister stepped out of the judge's chambers, where he'd been waiting in his old Marshal's uniform, silver star gleaming. He'd never been at the ranch. That had been a body double, keeping Michael's attention focused on the wrong target. 15 years, McCallister continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades hunting men like these. You spent them building a network of corruption. I spent them gathering evidence, tracking connections, waiting for the moment you'd bring everyone together. Michael's security teams moved to react, but found themselves surrounded by courthouse staff, who were actually Texas Rangers and FBI agents, all positioned days ago. See, your father's mistake was building an empire of criminals, McCallister explained, walking calmly down the aisle. Yours was thinking you could corrupt the very system of justice itself. But some things can't be corrupted. Some legends don't just die. Gordon lunged for a hidden weapon, but Buck, who'd been lying quietly under the judge's bench, took him down with practiced efficiency. The old Marshal and his dog, together one last time. All those officials you bribed? McCallister gestured. To the screens showing real-time footage. They're not just being exposed. They're being recorded right now, reacting to evidence of their own corruption. Your network isn't just being revealed, it's documenting its own destruction. Michael went for his gun, but found himself facing the business end of Sarah Chen's weapon. The young postal carrier who'd helped coordinate the entire operation stood revealed as McCallister's protégé, trained in secret over months of careful preparation. Iron Hand never lost his edge, boy, Sheriff Reeves said, emerging from the gallery with other disguised officers. He just learned to hunt smarter, not harder. This is impossible, Michael sputtered. The security, the precautions were exactly what I wanted. McCallister finished. Every corrupt official, every bought judge, every compromised cop, all gathered in one place, thinking they were here to witness their final victory. Instead, they're starring in their own takedown. The screens showed FBI teams simultaneously raiding offices across the state, armed with evidence McCallister had gathered over 15 years. Michael's entire network was being dismantled in real time, his father's dream of freedom transforming into a nightmare of justice. You forget what Iron Hand really means, McCallister said quietly, meeting Michael's eyes. It's not about violence. It's about the kind of grip that never lets go, the kind of justice that waits patiently for the perfect moment to strike. He turned to Gordon, the man whose empire he'd destroyed 15 years ago. Your son killed my partner to protect your legacy, then spent 15 years thinking he could outthink the man who brought you down. Instead, he just gathered all the evidence I needed in one place. Michael made one last desperate move, but found himself facing the same kind of precision takedown that had made Iron Hand a legend. In seconds, both Sawyers were in custody, their dreams of power shattered by the very system they'd tried to corrupt. "That's the thing about legends, boy," McCallister said as FBI agents led them away. "The real ones are built on more than just reputation. They're built on patience, intelligence, and the kind of justice that never forgets and never forgives." The Texas sun streamed through the courthouse windows, illuminating a scene that would be talked about for decades. The day Iron Hand McCallister didn't just stop a corrupt empire. He reminded everyone why some legends never truly retire. They just wait for the right moment to show why they became legends in the first place. The Austin courthouse steps swarmed with FBI agents and reporters as the scale of Iron Hand's operation became clear. Michael and Gordon Sawyer were led out in chains, followed by a procession of corrupt officials, dirty judges, and compromised law enforcement, an entire network of corruption exposed in one masterful stroke. McCallister stood quietly to the side, Buck at his feet, watching years of patient work come to fruition. Sarah Chen approached, still processing everything that had happened. "All those training sessions at the ranch," she said. "The postal routes you had me memorize. The communication systems you taught me to monitor. You were preparing me for this, weren't you?" "Been watching you since you started that route," McCallister nodded. "Saw the same qualities Angela had. The attention to detail, the dedication to justice. Figured Iron Hand's legacy needed a new generation." Sheriff Reeves joined them, holding up his phone. "Reports coming in from across the state, 37. Simultaneous raids, over 200 arrests. Michael's entire organization dismantled in under an hour." "The digital evidence is overwhelming," Sarah added. "Every corrupt deal, every bribed official, every criminal connection, all documented and impossible to deny. They'll be untangling this web for years." Michael Sawyer paused at the transport vehicle, looking back at McCallister with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "All this time, you weren't just some retired marshal hiding on a ranch." "No, son," McCallister replied quietly. "I was a hunter, waiting for his prey to walk into the perfect trap. Your father taught you everything about building criminal empires. Should have taught you why some legends are better left alone." "Gordon." Sawyer's face was ashen as he watched his second empire crumble, his dreams of freedom transformed into a deeper imprisonment. 15 years, he muttered. "You spent 15 years setting this up." "Justice doesn't have a time limit," McCallister answered, "and some debts can only be paid in full." As the transport vehicles pulled away, May Jenkins arrived from Miller's Creek with Bill Howard and other townspeople who'd helped maintain McCallister's cover all these years. "Those fellows watching your ranch finally figured out they were guarding an empty house," May reported with satisfaction. "Should have seen their faces when they realized they'd been had." "Town won't be the same without all the excitement," Bill added with a grin. McCallister touched the silver star on his chest, not just a badge now, but a symbol of promises kept and justice served. "Time to let the next generation take over," he said, looking at Sarah. "Iron Hand's work here is done." "About that," Sarah replied, pulling out an envelope, "FBI's offering me a special investigator position. Said someone recommended me highly. Something about carrying on a legacy." "Angela would be proud," McCallister said softly. "She always said the best justice isn't about force. It's about patience, observation, and letting your target think they're winning right up until they lose everything." The Texas sun began to set as reporters clamored for interviews. Federal agents processed evidence, and decades of corruption were exposed to the light. But Iron Hand McCallister had already slipped away quietly, heading back to his ranch with Buck at his side. Some legends, after all, are better served by actions than words, and the actions of this day would be remembered as long as there were lawmen to tell the story of how one patient, methodical Marshal reminded the world why some Reputations are built on more than just tales. They're built on the kind of justice that never forgets, never gives up, and never lets go. A month after the Sawyer case ended, McCallister sat on his porch, watching another Texas sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. Buck dozed at his feet, grey muzzle resting on worn boots. The ranch was quiet again, just as he'd always wanted it. Sarah's FBI badge caught the fading light as she climbed the porch steps, now wearing her new role as comfortably as McCallister wore his retirement. Thought you'd want to know. Michael and Gordon's sentencing came down today. They won't see daylight again. And the network? Still falling. Every day we uncover new connections, more corruption. But the system's cleaning itself out. Your evidence made sure of that. McCallister nodded, satisfied. On his lap lay Angela's old notebook, its pages finally at rest. She'd be proud of you, you know, taking up the work she started, learned from the best. Sarah settled into the other rocking chair. Town's gotten quiet again. Almost hard to believe what happened here. Best victories are the ones that fade. Into legend, McCallister replied. Let people wonder about Iron Hand. Truth is usually bigger than the stories anyway. Sheriff Reeves's truck appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust on the familiar road. He joined them on the porch, holding up a newspaper. The headline read, Sawyer Corruption Network Exposed, the Last Case of Iron Hand McCallister. There. Already telling stories about it, Reeves said. How one old Marshal outsmarted an army of criminals, though they don't know the half of it. Let them tell their tales. McCallister smiled. Sometimes a legend's more useful than the truth. As night settled over the Texas hills, the three of them sat in comfortable silence. McCallister's ranch would always be more than just a retirement home now. It would be remembered as the place where justice was served cold, where patience proved stronger than power, and where one last legend was born from the ashes of an old one. Iron Hand's legacy would live on, not in violence or force, but in the patient, methodical pursuit of justice. In the end, that was all any legend could hope for, to leave the world a little better than they found it, and to pass their torch to those who'd carry it forward. The stars emerged over Texas, eternal witnesses to tales of justice served and legends earned. And somewhere in their light, the ghost of Angela Martinez could finally rest easy, knowing her work, her sacrifice, and her legacy lived on in good hands. Some legends retire, others are reborn. But the best ones, they simply remind us why they became legends in the first place.